there's this true crime podcast that got this case on the map. It's called Serial.
Serial.
Serial. Podcast called Serial.
Serial is out.
Serial podcast captivating millions across the country.
It first premiered in 2014, and its first season focused on the murder of Hae Min Lee. This case grabbed the attention of millions. On January 13th, 1999, 18-year-old high school student Hae Min Lee was last seen at Woodlawn High School before completely disappearing. That was until February 9th, when a man named Alonzo Sellers had pulled off on the side of the road to use the bathroom. He ended up finding a buried body in a shallow grave. After calling the police, they learned it was Hae Min Lee. She was found nearly 8 miles from the school in Lincoln Park. Sadly, she had been strangled to death. This was no longer a missing persons case, but a homicide. Baltimore County Police continued to have no leads until they received an anonymous phone call.
Hello?
Suggesting they take a closer look at Hae's ex-boyfriend, Adnan Syed. Once they got a hold of Adnan's cell phone, it eventually led investigators to Jay Wilds. Jay is an older friend of Adnan's. Jay claims that Adnan told him in the weeks prior to Hae's disappearance that he was going to kill her, because she had embarrassed and rejected him after their final breakup in December of 1998. He then tells police Adnan had come up with a plan. The plan was for him to take Adnan's car and phone for the day, and Adnan would ask Hae for a ride after school. Jay then tells the police Adnan later called him to meet up in the Best Buy parking lot. Adnan leads him to the trunk, then opens it to show what he had done. He even went on to tell detectives that after Adnan killed Hae, he manipulated him into helping him bury her body, threatening to tell police about his alleged drug dealing. Within hours of Jay's interview, Adnan Syed was arrested. This might sound like a cut-and-dry investigation, but there are many inconsistencies. Firstly, Krista, a friend of Hae, had overheard a conversation where she told Adnan she couldn't give him a ride that day. So how does that add up to Jay's account of what happened? When the police asked Adnan about that day, he said that day was unremarkable. Nothing stood out. He said he went to school, then gave his car and phone to Jay so he could pick up a birthday gift for his girlfriend Stephanie. After school, he went to the library, track practice, and then brought his father dinner at the mosque. But Adnan's phone records said a different story. Cell phone tower pings traced him to the school, the Best Buy parking lot, and where Hae was buried in Lincoln Park. With that in Jay's claims, they are able to establish a time of death to be between 2:15 and 2:36 p.m. After Adnan's arrest, students were told not to contact him, but one student did, Asia McClain. She writes a letter to him in jail saying she saw and talked to him in the library around 2:30. During the window, police believed Adnan killed Hae.
I was sitting in the library bored to tears, and someone walked in that I knew. He didn't seem to be disturbed or angry with her.
Asia then writes a second letter to him, but Christina Gutierrez, Adnan's attorney, never reaches out to her, ever. As the investigation continued, Jay Wilds talked to the cops 3 more times, changing his story each time. The main one being how he knew nothing about Adnan's plan to kill Hae. Then he changed it that he knew a few days instead of a few weeks before. Once he testifies at trial, he goes back to saying he knew nothing until the day of. Jay also changes where Adnan first showed him Hae's body in the trunk of her car. He first states he saw her on Edmondson Avenue.
I went to pick him up from off of Emerson Avenue at a strip, and he popped the trunk open. And
you say on Edmondson Avenue off of the strip. Do you recall any cross streets on Edmondson Avenue where you go to meet him?
I don't know him by name, but I can tell him to you by sight.
Then he switches and he says he met up with him in the Best Buy parking lot.
And while en route to your house,
Yes.
you received a phone call from Adnan.
Yes.
On his cell phone.
Yes.
Which is in your possession.
Yes.
And the conversation was what?
That bitch is dead. Come and get me. I'm at Best Buy.
I don't know how you can forget where you saw a dead body. As you can see, Jay has a lot of inconsistencies, but police are still taking his word for it. Going back to Adnan's cell phone records, police obtained them from AT&T, but it seems they forgot to do something. Police seem to have not read the fine print that stated, outgoing calls are only reliable for location status. Any incoming calls will not be considered reliable information. It's also fair to point out that many experts today believe the angle of the cell phone towers were incorrect.
Are pointed.
Sure.
Okay, so this is not pointed in the correct direction. The way I set it up is the way is correctly pointed. What they did was they misinterpreted the direction of which way these cell towers were pointed.
So again,
Jay eventually accepts a deal from the DA and pleads guilty to accessory to after the fact of Hayes' murder. He would become the star witness for the prosecution. During the trial, a very specific timeline would be introduced. The prosecution believed Hay had been murdered within a 21-minute window, between 2:15 when school was let out and 2:36 when Adnan called Jay. According to them, in those 21 minutes, they believed Adnan and Hay left Woodlawn. He then strangled her in the Best Buy parking lot, put her in the trunk, and then with Jay went to Lincoln Park to bury her. Reportedly, there were items like a rope, a bottle, and some feathers found near her body. All these items were tested, and none matched Adnan's DNA.
None of those items were tested against anyone else other than Adnan, and they did not match him. They had tunnel vision on Adnan.
The trial lasts 6 weeks, and within a few hours, the jury finds Adnan Syed guilty of all charges, including kidnapping and first-degree murder. Even after having no solid stories or evidence proving Adnan killed Hay, he is sentenced to life plus 30 years. Finally, in September of 2022, after 23 years of maintaining his innocence, Adnan was released from prison. A judge vacated his conviction because they found evidence suggesting his innocence. This doesn't mean this is over for Adnan Syed. There's still a ways to go, but justice might finally be served, not only for Adnan, but for Hae Min Lee. But if Adnan didn't kill Hae, who was able to get away with it for 23 years?